I spent the entire evening making the pumpkin pie my cousin Emma complimented last holiday season, its warm spices filling my tiny kitchen with a fleeting sense of belonging. Deep down, I knew the invitation, just like every year, was more of a courtesy than a genuine gesture. A perfunctory nod to family ties. I was always the last name on the list, but Ethan and Sophie were so excited, their eyes sparkling with anticipation, that I couldn't say no. We arrived at my sister Abigail's house right on time, the grandeur of her suburban mansion in West Haven looming like a stage for her perfect life. Her estate was decked out with twinkling lights on the iron fence and wreaths in every window, a polished facade of holiday cheer. Ethan clutched my hand tightly, his small fingers trembling with nervous excitement, and Sophie held the pie box as if it were a priceless treasure, her careful steps betraying her fear of disappointing me. Abigail opened the door, her smile polite and calculated, as if rehearsed for a photo op. She wore a burgundy velvet dress, her hair perfectly curled, stepping out like she was about to walk onto a stage, her presence commanding yet cold. "Oh, Sarah, you came," she said, her tone dripping with faint surprise, as if my presence was an unexpected inconvenience. I leaned in for a quick hug, but she didn't return it, her body stiff and unyielding. Her eyes scanned the pie box, narrowing slightly. "I told you not to bring anything this year. Pumpkin pie? Let's hope it's not too sweet." Then she turned and walked back inside without waiting for reply, her heels clicking dismissively on the polished hardwood. "Why does Aunt Abigail always sound mad at you?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible, his grip tightening on my hand. I forced a smile, masking the sting. "She's just busy hosting, sweetheart. Let's go in." Inside, laughter filled the air, mixed with the scent of turkey and cinnamon, a scene straight out of a holiday catalog. Everyone was dressed beautifully, their silk dresses and tailored suits, a stark contrast to our modest outfits. Chatting and laughing around a long, magazine-worthy dinner table adorned with crystal glassware and gold-rimmed plates. We stood near the door, lost among familiar strangers, our presence barely registering. No one offered us a seat. No one greeted us, their eyes sliding past us as if we were invisible. They talked as if the three of us were just shadows in the corner, their voices loud with anecdotes about ski trips and charity galas. I kept smiling, my face aching from the effort, clinging to the hope that someone would acknowledge us. I set the pie on the kitchen counter while Ethan helped Sophie take off her coat, his movements gentle but tense. Sophie looked up at me, her eyes wide with confusion, and whispered, "Mommy, why isn't anyone saying hi to us?" I knelt to tie her shoelace, my heart twisting, and whispered back, "They're just busy, sweetheart." But the truth burned in my chest. We weren't busy to them. We were irrelevant. "I just checked the seating chart. It's a bit tight," she said, her voice clipped, as if we were an afterthought. "Sarah, you don't mind sitting in the side room, do you? There's a small table in the laundry room. It's been cleaned." I thought I'd misheard, the words landing like a slap. "The laundry room?" "The laundry room!" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper, hoping she'd backtrack. "Yes, it's clean and quiet," she said, winking as if sharing a secret. "The kids will be more comfortable there. You know, better than having them squeeze in with all the adults." Her wink was a blade, cutting through my dignity. Ethan held my hand, his fingers tightening, and Sophie lowered her gaze, her small shoulders slumping. I smiled faintly, the reflex of years of swallowing hurt, picked up the pie and followed Abigail's direction. The side room, past the back door, was literally a laundry room, the air thick with the scent of detergent. The washer still hummed a low, mocking drone. A small wooden table was pushed against the wall, flanked by 2 folding chairs and a tiny plastic kid's chair, its faded red clashing with the sterile surroundings. No tablecloth, no warm lighting, just a buzzing fluorescent bulb overhead, casting harsh shadows. I set the food down and took a deep breath, my chest tight with suppressed rage. Ethan sat silently, his eyes fixed on the table's chipped edge. Sophie climbed onto the plastic chair, her tiny hand resting on her knee, her face a mask of quiet disappointment. No one spoke, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. I opened the pie box and served 3 small slices, knowing no one else would touch them, my hands trembling as I cut through the crust. Laughter from the living room pierced through my composure like needles, each burst a reminder of our exclusion. My throat tightened when Sophie asked, her voice small, "Why doesn't Aunt Abigail want us to sit with everyone?" I smiled again, the same smile I'd trained myself to wear for years, though it felt like a lie. "It's not that they don't want us there, they just don't understand, honey." Ethan stared at me, his eyes sharp, with a wisdom beyond his years. "Maybe next year we shouldn't come, Mom." I didn't answer right away, the weight of his words sinking in. I looked at my kids, one still trying to understand why we were left out, the other pretending not to understand anymore. And at that moment, under the cold white light and the hum of the washing machine, I knew today wasn't a holiday. Today was a lesson, and I had learned it. I sat upright, poured water into 3 plastic cups like we were in a fine restaurant, determined to salvage some dignity. "Happy Thanksgiving, babies, wherever we are. As long as we're together, that's enough." Sophie smiled, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. Ethan raised his cup, his eyes no longer sad. And I thought to myself, one day, I'll show them, not with anger, but with my worth. As I plated the pie, Abigail's voice drifted in from the dining room, sharp and cutting. "Oh, Sarah brought that pie again. Honestly, she tries so hard, but it's always too sweet. We'll just stick it in the fridge for later." Laughter followed, light but cruel, and I felt Ethan tense beside me. I squeezed his shoulder, whispering, "Don't listen, honey. They don't know what they're missing." I was about to throw away the leftover pie, its untouched slices a silent rebuke, when we heard tires screech outside the tiny window above the washer. All 3 of us looked up, startled by the sudden noise. Ethan raised his eyebrows, his curiosity pricked. Sophie sat up straighter, her eyes wide with wonder. Headlights swept across the wall, harsh and blinding, and stopped right at the back door. A long, sleek black car pulled up quietly on the gravel path leading to the backyard. Not an SUV, not a neighbor's car, a limousine, its polished surface gleaming under the moonlight. Ethan leaned toward the window, wide-eyed. "Mom, that car!" I stepped beside him, peering through the frosted glass, my heart pounding with a mix of confusion and intrigue. A man in a black suit, wearing a hat and white gloves, opened the back door with practiced precision. Then a woman stepped out, poised, composed, her heels clicking softly but decisively on the gravel, each step radiating authority. She wore a navy wool coat with a high collar over a knee-length sweater dress, her silver hair neatly pinned up. Her face showed signs of life lived fully, but no bitterness, only a quiet strength. She looked around calmly, her gaze sharp and purposeful. Then her eyes landed exactly where we were standing, piercing through the dim laundry room window. At the back door, Sophie whispered, her voice trembling with awe, "Mommy, she's looking at us." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing, and cracked the door open. A rush of cold air swept in, carrying a hint of snow and the faint jasmine scent of her scarf, a stark contrast to the detergent-heavy room. "Hello," she said, her voice clear and confident, cutting through the hum of the washer. "I'm looking for Sarah Mitchell." I froze, my hand gripping the doorframe. "Yes, I'm Sarah," I said, my voice barely steady, unsure why this stranger knew my name. She smiled slowly, her eyes warm yet discerning. "Good. I'm Margaret Vance, Executive Director of Empowerment Collective, a foundation supporting single mothers and women who've been pushed to the margins." She stepped forward, her presence filling the cramped space. "I'm here because of a story, a post you wrote 2 years ago on a community forum about rebuilding your life after living in a shelter." My heart skipped a beat, a flood of memories rushing back. That post. I typed it on my phone one late night after work while Ethan had a fever and Sophie was asleep on the couch, her small body curled against a threadbare blanket. I didn't write it for attention, just to let something out, a desperate release of pain and hope. "I never thought anyone would read it. You found that?" I stammered, my cheeks flushing with disbelief. Margaret nodded, her expression softening. "Your post spread through our network. We've been searching for you for 8 months. When your name appeared on an old volunteer registry, I decided to come myself." She glanced around at the laundry room setting, her eyes narrowing slightly, not with judgment but with understanding. I didn't expect to find you here. I blushed, the humiliation of the setting stinging anew. I didn't expect to be found in a laundry room, I said, forcing a weak laugh. Ethan gently squeezed my hand, his touch grounding me, while Sophie still clutched her dress, her eyes darting between me and Margaret. Margaret smiled, her gaze steady. I'm here to invite you to be a featured speaker for Empowerment Collective's upcoming Inspiration Series. We'd like you to be our keynote speaker at the summer conference to share your story from the beginning, no filters, no embellishment. You'll be compensated fairly, $10,000, for, no, 0 cents for the speech alone plus expenses. We also want to publish your story as a book with full editorial control in your hands. I stood frozen, the numbers and opportunities swirling in my mind, unsure what to say. Part of me didn't believe it, the offer $2,000 for someone like me. Another part felt a spark of relief, as if the universe had finally noticed my struggle. Are you sure? I heard myself ask, my voice small. I'm just a mom trying to survive. Margaret looked at me like I'd said something absurd, her eyes fierce with conviction. That's exactly why we need you, she replied. We don't need perfect success stories. We need people like you, real, brave, and still moving forward despite everything. Ethan looked up at me, his voice urgent. You'll do it, right, Mom? You have to. I looked at him, then at Sophie, whose wide eyes held a quiet hope, then back at Margaret. Yes, I said, my voice gaining strength. I will. Margaret nodded, her smile widening. The car is waiting. If you're ready, we can talk more over dinner. I glanced back at the folding table, the half-eaten pie sitting forlornly under the fluorescent light, a symbol of my family's disregard. Let me grab my coat, I said, then paused, realizing I didn't need it. No need, Margaret said, her smile warm but firm. We'll take care of you from here. As I held my children's hands, we stepped out of that suffocating room, the cold wind biting at my cheeks, but my heart felt strangely warm. The gravel crunched under our feet, a sound of departure, of escape. And when the car door shut behind us, I knew the world had just shifted, not because I fought for a place, but because finally my worth had been seen. As the limousine pulled away, Abigail's voice echoed from the front porch, sharp and frantic. Sarah, where are you going? You can't just leave like this. I glanced back through the tinted window, seeing her silhouette framed by the mansion's glowing lights, her face a mix of shock and indignation. Keep driving, I whispered to the driver, my voice steady, and turned to my kids, their faces lit with wonder. We're not going back. On the way to the restaurant Margaret had reserved, a chic bistro in New Haven's historic district, I was still in disbelief, the limousine's leather seats and soft lighting feeling like a dream. Ethan sat beside me, clutching the pumpkin pie like it was a treasure, a remnant of the night we were leaving behind, while Sophie leaned against me, her wide eyes fixed on the softly lit ceiling above, tracing the intricate paneling with awe. Beside the window, Abigail's neighborhood faded behind us like a memory being quietly erased, the twinkling lights of West Haven shrinking into the distance. Margaret smiled at us through the small divider window between us and the driver, her presence a steady anchor in the surreal moment. I know this might all feel sudden, but I've wanted to meet you for a long time, Sarah. I turned toward her, my mind racing. You said you found me because of a post, not just one. Margaret nodded, her voice low and warm, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen countless stories like mine. A whole series of short posts you shared over about 8 months after leaving your ex-husband. You wrote about your night shifts at the diner, scrubbing grease off counters until a minimum $5, 0 cents, left for gas and praying the tank would hold out. About turning a packet of instant noodles into a living room party with your kids, complete with paper crowns you made from old flyers. I read every word, and I cried. My cheeks flushed, not from shame but from overwhelm, the rawness of those memories flooding back. I had written those words in silence late at night when the world slept, sitting on a wooden kitchen chair in our cramped apartment, trying not to wake the kids. I never thought anyone would read them, let alone someone like Margaret Vance, a woman whose name graced the pages of national philanthropy journals. I still remember one line, she continued, her eyes locking onto mine. I don't want my kids to think they have to toughen up to survive. I want them to know they deserve to live, to breathe, and to dream. I've never read anything so honest. I clenched my hands gently, trying to steady my voice, the weight of her words pressing against my chest. I just wrote so I wouldn't fall apart, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And that's what made it powerful, she replied, her tone unwavering. And Empowerment Collective is hosting our summer summit soon, bringing together activists, writers, educators, and single mothers from across the country. We need someone to open it, not with credentials, but with heart and lived truth. I want that person to be you. I looked at Ethan and Sophie, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the limousine's interior. Ethan sat still, staring out the window, but his hand rested lightly on his sister's shoulder, a quiet gesture of protection. Sophie remained tucked close to me, nodding softly as if sensing a shift in our lives, her small fingers clutching my sleeve. But I've never spoken in front of a crowd, I said quietly, doubt creeping in. I'm not a polished speaker. Margaret placed a hand on her chest, her sapphire ring catching the light. Sarah, what moves people isn't polish, it's truth, and your truth is what they need to hear. You've already spoken to thousands through your words online. Now let them hear your voice. I stayed quiet the rest of the ride, my mind a whirlwind of fear and possibility. When the car pulled up, the driver opened the door and I stepped out with my children into the crisp New Haven night. The restaurant sat tucked into a quiet corner, understated yet refined, with warm yellow lights spilling onto the cobblestone street and the smell of fresh bread wafting through the air. We were led to a private room, its walls adorned with local art, a stark contrast to the sterile laundry room we'd left behind. On the table was a customer's menu for the evening, and a thin folder placed in front of me, its cover embossed with the Empowerment Collective logo. Margaret gestured toward it. A preliminary contract. If you agree, we'll cover everything: travel, lodging, childcare, whatever helps you focus on telling your story. I opened the folder and skimmed the neatly typed, respectful text, my breath catching as I saw my name printed boldly at the top. Sarah Mitchell, keynote speaker, Empowerment Collective, Summer Summit 2027. I exhaled, a long, choked breath of relief and disbelief, the reality of the moment sinking in. I used to think the years I spent struggling through life left nothing behind but exhaustion, scars of nights spent crying over unpaid bills. But it turns out the late nights writing blog posts on my old phone, the short journal entries I thought were forgotten, had become the bridge leading me into the light. Margaret raised her glass of water and looked at me like she saw a version of me I hadn't dared to believe in. I believe in you, Sarah, and I think it's time you believe in yourself, too. As we sipped our drinks, Abigail's text buzzed on my phone. Sarah, you left without saying goodbye? Everyone's asking where you went. This is so embarrassing. I showed it to Margaret, my jaw tight with frustration. She raised an eyebrow, her expression a mix of amusement and disdain. Sounds like she's more worried about her party than her sister. Let her stew. You've got bigger things ahead. I never imagined a night that began in a laundry room, with its humming washer and cold fluorescent light, could end in an elegant restaurant beside a woman who had read every word I'd written in my weakest moments. Margaret didn't just speak kindly. She treated me as someone who mattered, not a footnote in someone else's story. When she pushed the contract toward me, I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the page. The bolded words on the first page made me pause. Sarah Mitchell, author and keynote speaker, Empowerment Collective 2027. I read it again, slower this time, afraid it would disappear if I blinked, the weight of the moment pressing against my chest. Is this real? I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. Margaret nodded, her smile patient yet unwavering. Very real, Sarah. You're not imagining it. She went over the terms with a calm precision that grounded me. Her organization would cover everything for me and the kids throughout the conference: airfare, a suite at a luxury hotel, gourmet meals, and on-site childcare with activities tailored for Ethan and Sophie. A team of professional editors would help shape my speech and manuscript, ensuring my voice remained authentic. They don't want to change your voice, she emphasized. They just want to help you tell the story in its fullest form. I looked down and realized I had been gripping the cloth napkin, my knuckles white with tension. Ethan gently reached over, took the pumpkin pie box from my hands, and set it aside, as if helping me release the last burden of that night, his small gesture a quiet act of love. Sophie rested her head on my shoulder, her wide eyes quietly absorbing every detail, her fingers tracing the edge of the tablecloth. She spoke just one sentence, her voice soft but certain. "Mom, they chose you because you're you." I turned and smiled at her, tears stinging my eyes, her words cutting through my doubt. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Abigail's sister or Mrs. Mitchell's daughter or the divorced woman with 2 kids scraping by. I was simply myself. Sarah, the one who wrote with her whole heart, not knowing if anyone would ever read it, but writing because she couldn't not. Margaret lifted her cup of tea, the golden light catching on the sapphire ring on her hand. "I once told my team," she began, her voice rich with conviction, "if you want someone who can shift the mood of a whole room with their real story, find Sarah Mitchell." I laughed, a little embarrassed, the sound breaking the tension. "I used to write for 20 readers. Half of them were single moms I met at the community center. And now," Margaret said, her eyes gleaming, "you'll write for thousands, and I believe they need you more than ever. Your story isn't just yours anymore. It's a beacon for others." As the server brought our appetizers, my phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from my mother. I played it on speaker, keeping the volume low. "Sarah, what's going on? Abigail says you left in some fancy car without a word. People are talking. You're making us look bad. Call me back." The message was cold, laced with accusation, and I felt Ethan's hand stiffen in mine. Margaret leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. "They're more concerned with appearances than your pain. That's their loss, Sarah. You don't owe them an explanation." I nodded, deleting the voicemail, a small act of defiance that felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When dinner ended, I signed the contract, my hand trembling not from fear, but because I knew this was a turning point. Not the cinematic kind with fireworks and fanfare, but a quiet, internal click, like the final gear slipping into place, aligning my past with a future I hadn't dared to imagine. On the way back, the limousine glided past streets I once knew, but they looked different now, bathed in the soft glow of holiday lights. The houses didn't sting anymore, their grandeur no longer a reminder of my exclusion. The little diners I once cleaned felt like part of the mosaic of my journey, each late-night shift a step toward this moment. Ethan whispered, his voice filled with boyish excitement. "Mom, you kind of look like a celebrity." I shook my head and squeezed his hand, a smile breaking through. "Not a celebrity, honey, just respected." I turned to Margaret and thanked her again, my voice thick with gratitude. She smiled, looking at me not with pity, but with recognition, as if seeing the woman I was becoming. "Sarah, they didn't give you a seat at the table, but tonight you were handed a stage. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small again." I nodded, feeling light in a way I hadn't for years, the weight of years of rejection lifting. And I knew from now on I wouldn't be knocking on doors for a place. I'd be building my own. Just as I closed the limousine door, I caught a glimpse of my mother through the dining room curtain, her silhouette stark against the warm glow of Abigail's mansion. Her face caught between shock and confusion, as if realizing she'd underestimated me. Beside her, Abigail gripped her wine stem, lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came, her composure cracking under the weight of my departure. My brother-in-law, Daniel, leaned against the fireplace, phone in hand, eyes following the car pulling away from their gate, his expression a mix of curiosity and unease. I once dreamed of leaving that house with my head held high, proving I was more than their afterthought. But never did I imagine I'd be leaving in a limousine with my children by my side and a powerful woman ready to bring my story to thousands. Ethan sat across from me, eyes sparkling with excitement, his voice barely containing his glee. "Did you see them watching, Mom? They looked so mad." I nodded, a quiet satisfaction settling in. "I saw." Sophie leaned into me, her small hand resting on mine as if to be sure I was the most important person in the family, she said, her voice sweet and clear, cutting through the tension. But today she wasn't. I smiled, brushing her hair, her insight piercing yet innocent. Today they watched, and I was heard. Margaret turned, her voice soft but firm, carrying the weight of someone who'd witnessed countless transformations. I've seen many moments like this, when someone is finally seen for who they truly are. But this one, Sarah, I will remember most. I didn't respond right away. The emotions steady now, not sharp like before. Not pain, just healing. Not revenge, just living, acknowledged and moving forward. But as the limousine pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text from Abigail. "You think you're better than us now? Good luck keeping that spotlight. You'll crash and burn, Sarah." The venom in her words was palpable, a desperate attempt to drag me back into her shadow. I showed it to Margaret, my jaw tight with anger. She shook her head, her expression one of quiet resolve. "Jealousy's a weak weapon, Sarah. Let her rage. You've already won by choosing yourself." The car turned into the city center, where holiday lights sparkled on every block, their glow a stark contrast to the cold exclusion of Abigail's mansion. I suddenly remembered past Thanksgivings, waiting in line at church for a frozen turkey, splitting the last potato so Ethan and Sophie could have enough, the ache of hunger masked by forced smiles. Those years weren't wasted. They'd built the foundation for this moment, each struggle a brick in the path to this night. Margaret reached into her leather briefcase and placed a small folder on my lap, its weight grounding me in the surreal. "There's one more thing," she said. "We've spoken with a publisher in Hartford. They read the draft manuscript our editors assembled from your blog. They're very interested, and they want you to develop it into a full memoir, not just in print. They want an audiobook read by you." My eyes widened, the scope of the opportunity overwhelming. "Me? I'd read it?" "Your own voice," Margaret smiled, her eyes gleaming with certainty. "Because it carries something no one else can replicate: truth." I felt like a door had just opened inside me, not just as a speaker or writer, but as a storyteller in my own voice, unfiltered and unapologetic. "So, where do we start next week?" she said, her tone brisk but warm. "We've got a studio in Boston. It's ready. Don't worry, we'll provide accommodations for all three of you. Ethan and Sophie can explore the city, and if you're open to it, we can pair with a local TV station, Channel 7, to share your story on their morning show." I laughed, aloud, the sound bubbling up from a place of pure disbelief. "This is really happening, isn't it? This isn't a dream." Ethan raised his eyebrows, his grin wide. "If it is, I don't want to wake up." Sophie nodded hard, her curls bouncing, her voice fierce with conviction. "Mom, don't ever go back to that house again." I looked at her, then out the window, watching the golden lights blur past, the city a canvas of possibility. "No, I won't go back," I said, my voice steady. "Because from now on, I'll build my own home." The limousine pulled up to a small, elegant hotel already arranged for us, its facade glowing with understated charm. The driver opened the door, and Margaret waved goodbye, reminding me of the press event the next morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I held my children's hands and stepped into the hotel lobby, the marble floors and soft lighting a world away from the laundry room we'd left behind, still not quite believing I had escaped that cold, forgotten space less than 4 hours ago. And somewhere deep in my heart, I knew this journey was just beginning, a path I'd walk on my own terms. No more bowing, no more asking for permission. As we checked in, my phone buzzed again, this time a group chat message from my cousin Emma. "Sarah, what was that limo about? Abigail's freaking out, saying you're trying to upstage her. Call me." I ignored it, handing the phone to Ethan to silence notifications. "Let them talk," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "They don't get to write my story anymore." The morning of the first conference came faster than I expected, the summer sun streaming through the Boston hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood backstage holding my speech, carefully marked with yellow sticky notes Sophie had helped me place, her careful handwriting a reminder of her faith in me. Ethan was in the front row, the navy shirt he'd chosen making him look older than 13, his posture proud but nervous. Sophie sat beside him, tightly gripping the conference program like it was a treasure, her eyes scanning the crowd with quiet excitement. When the MC called my name, a rush of electricity ran down my spine, my heart pounding as I stepped forward. I walked onto the stage under soft white lights, the auditorium's vastness both daunting and exhilarating. The room fell silent. Hundreds of women from all over, some in tailored suits, some in simple clothes, watching me with open, hopeful eyes, their anticipation a tangible weight. I began with where it all started. The laundry room at my sister's house on a cold Thanksgiving 2 years ago, the hum of the washer a cruel backdrop to our exclusion. I told them about the years in a 2-bedroom apartment, working 2 shifts a day at a greasy diner, and blogging at midnight to hold myself together, my fingers trembling over a cracked phone screen. I didn't sugarcoat anything. The shame of food lines, the sting of my family's indifference, the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd ever be enough. And, most importantly, I spoke about the moment I stepped into that limousine with my kids, knowing I had just left the past behind and stepped into the life I chose, the gravel crunching under my feet like a declaration of freedom. When I finished, the room stayed silent for a beat, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then came one clap, then another, a slow ripple that grew into a thunderous eruption of applause, so loud I almost cried. One woman stood, her hands clasped in gratitude, then another, and then the entire room stood, their faces a mosaic of empathy and inspiration. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't a dream. After my speech, I spent 3 hours meeting attendees, their stories pouring out like a river. They came to me with shining eyes, holding my hands, their voices trembling with shared pain and hope. One woman, a single mother of 2, had lived in her car with her toddlers, her voice breaking as she thanked me for giving her courage to keep going. Another had just left a suffocating marriage, her eyes fierce with newfound resolve. A retired teacher, her hair streaked with silver, told me she'd felt invisible in her family until she heard me speak. "I don't need permission to exist anymore," she said, her grip firm on my hand. "Thank you for saying what I've always felt." That sentence stayed with me all day, a reminder of the power of truth. As I signed programs, my phone vibrated with a message from Abigail, forwarded by Emma. "Saw your speech online. Don't think this makes you special. You're still the same Sarah who begged for scraps." The cruelty of her words stung, but I deleted it, refusing to let her poison this moment. Margaret, standing nearby, caught my expression and leaned in. "She's lashing out because you've outgrown her world. Keep shining, Sarah." 2 months later, More Than Enough officially launched, its release a milestone I could scarcely believe. The cover showed a black and white photo of me and my kids hand in hand, crossing a busy Providence street, symbolizing how we'd walked through the noise and found our way back to each other, our silhouettes defiant against the city's blur. I cried, holding the first copy. Not because I had a book, but because for the first time my name was printed clearly, not under someone else's, not as someone's sister or someone's daughter, but as Sarah Mitchell, author and... The messages started pouring in, emails, comments, handwritten letters, each one a testament to the book's reach. People shared photos of their favorite passages, underlined and dog-eared, or told me they read the book all night and felt held, their tears staining the pages. One message, from a young mother in Hartford, moved me so deeply I had to sit in silence for a while. "I used to think my worth only existed if others saw it. But you helped me realize real worth is in how we keep rising every time we're pushed aside. I don't know if I can change the whole world, but I know this. I've touched someone's world, and that's enough." The book's launch coincided with a surprise call from Abigail, her voice tight with forced civility. "Sarah, I saw your book in the bookstore. Congratulations, I guess, but don't expect an apology. You blew our family issues out of proportion with that post." Her words were a last-ditch effort to reclaim control, but they lacked the power they once held. "I don't need your apology, Abigail," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "I needed your respect, and you couldn't give it. My story's not about you. It's about me and the people who see me." I hung up, her stunned silence a victory sweeter than any apology. That evening, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen of our new apartment in Providence, its cozy warmth a far cry from our old drafty rental, Sophie hugged me from behind and whispered, "Mom, do you know how many people called you inspiring today?" I laughed, turning to look at her, her curls framing her earnest face. "I'm just someone who learned not to ask for permission to be herself. Ethan looked up from the couch where he was sketching a comic inspired by our journey. You didn't just learn it. You taught us. I stopped what I was doing, dried my hands, and sat down between my two kids, the weight of their love anchoring me. I used to think I was just the leftover pieces other people didn't want, but now I know I've always been more than that. 2 years after that fateful night in Abigail's laundry room, Thanksgiving came around again. But this time, I wasn't waiting outside a door, hoping to be let in, my heart pounding with the fear of rejection. I wasn't holding a paper plate, sitting quietly in some cold, forgotten room, the hum of a washer drowning out my voice. This year, Thanksgiving was held right in my small apartment in Providence, its walls painted a soft sage green, a color I'd chosen to mark our new beginning. It wasn't fancy, no crystal chandeliers or 12-seat table like my sister's, but my kitchen was warm, alive with the scent of roasting turkey and fresh herbs. The pumpkin pie smelled amazing, its golden crust a testament to the care I'd poured into it. And most importantly, everyone there wanted to be there, their presence a deliberate choice, not an obligation. I woke up early to roast the turkey, the oven's warmth filling the apartment, while Ethan was in charge of the mashed potatoes, his careful stirring a point of pride. And Sophie busied herself writing handmade thank you cards for each guest, her tongue peeking out in concentration. She designed every card herself, decorated them with little leaf stickers, and wrote in sparkly ink, "Thank you for being the real family to me and my mom." There were just 8 of us at the table. The 3 of us, Margaret, 2 friends I met at last year's conference, Nora and Elise, and our elderly neighbors from across the hall, Henry and Clara, who once lent me a pan when I first moved in, their quiet kindness a lifeline in those early days. None of them were blood relatives, but each had shown up with the kind of kindness I'd longed for my whole life, their laughter and stories weaving a tapestry of belonging. Margaret arrived early, bringing homemade cranberry sauce, its tart sweetness a perfect complement to the meal. She entered the way she always did, confident, calm, and with a quiet grace that made everyone feel valued without needing to say a word. "This is the first year I didn't attend the office party," she said, as she placed the bowl on the table, her sapphire ring catching the light. "I think this is where I really wanted to be." I smiled, tying an apron around her waist, the gesture a playful nod to our growing bond. "Well, then today, you're not the director. You're my sous chef," Margaret teased, her eyes twinkling. "You might want to rethink your leadership style, Sarah." Laughter filled the kitchen and spilled into the living room, a sound so pure it drowned out the echoes of past Thanksgivings. Ethan turned on some soft jazz, the notes mingling with the clink of dishes while Sophie darted around making sure each fork was perfectly placed, reminding me every time I forgot the napkins should go on the left. We gathered around a small round table, too small for all the food, so a few dishes were stacked on the bookshelf, but no one cared, the informality adding to the warmth. Henry told the story of how he met Clara at a community dance, his voice rich with nostalgia. Elise shared her project supporting single mothers in Hartford, her passion infectious. Nora excitedly mentioned starting her first pottery class, her hands animated as she described her latest creation. And me? I just sat there, listening, smiling and looking at my kids with a gratitude too big for words, their faces glowing with the joy of belonging. As the meal wound down, Sophie stood up, holding a folded piece of paper, her posture straight and serious. She cleared her throat, her small voice cutting through the chatter like a bell. "I have a speech," she said, and everyone chuckled, the room falling silent with affectionate anticipation. "The first Thanksgiving speech?" I whispered, my heart swelling with pride. Sophie began to read, slowly but confidently. 2 years ago, I ate Thanksgiving dinner in a laundry room. I didn't understand why we were placed there, but this year I get it, because if we hadn't been put there, we wouldn't have found the place we belong. Today, I know I'm home. I covered my mouth, tears slipping out before I noticed in the weight of her words piercing my heart. Margaret gently placed her hand over mine and gave it a soft squeeze, her eyes glistening with shared emotion. Ethan stood up after his sister, quietly adding, his voice steady but thick with feeling. "Mom, we're proud of you. Thank you for never stopping." I stood too, raising my glass of apple cider, my voice trembling with the depth of the moment. I used to think family was something unchangeable. Those who gave birth to us, raised us, but now I understand. Family is the people who choose to love you freely every day. And today, I'm surrounded by the family I built with my own heart. We clinked glasses, not in unison, not perfectly, but with sincerity. The sound a chorus of connection. After dinner, Sophie pulled out an old board game, her laughter ringing as she explained the rules with exaggerated seriousness, and Ethan replayed the video of my conference speech on his tablet. I didn't stop him, no longer afraid of hearing myself, but who now knew she didn't need permission to matter. As we played, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother, forwarded by Emma. Emma Gale's hosting a big Thanksgiving gala this year. She says you're not invited after last year's stunt. Thought you should know. The words were meant to wound, but they bounced off me, their sting dulled by the warmth of my chosen family. I showed the message to Margaret, who rolled her eyes with a wry smile. Sounds like she's throwing a party to prove she's still in control. Let her. You've got a bigger stage now. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the kitchen holding a warm mug of tea, candles flickering low, their soft glow casting shadows on the sage-green walls. A new message came in from my mother, just like every year, cold and short. Hope you're doing okay. Happy Thanksgiving. I didn't respond right away. The familiar chill of her words no match for the warmth around me. I looked around our little apartment, crumbs on the table, Sophie's card still in the center, and laughter still echoing softly in my heart. I smiled, a quiet triumph settling in. I was okay. More than okay. Because I had found a family that didn't need to share my blood to be part of my soul. Their love a fire that no cold message could extinguish. Before bed, Ethan slipped a drawing under my door, a sketch of the three of us standing on a stage, hands linked, with a crowd cheering below. For you, Mom, he'd written in his careful scrawl. You're our hero. I held it to my chest, tears falling freely now, knowing this was the family I'd always dreamed of, built not on obligation but on choice. A week after Thanksgiving, I received an invitation from the National Women's Forum, their letter arriving in a crisp envelope embossed with gold. They wanted me back as a guest of honor for the closing session, but this time not just to speak, to join a roundtable with women who had heard my speech 2 years ago and made powerful changes in their lives. I said yes without hesitation, the decision as natural as breathing, because I knew my presence wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about listening, sharing, and reaffirming one truth. Sometimes being pushed aside isn't the end. It's the beginning of something far more meaningful. The forum was held at a newly opened art center in Boston, its glass walls reflecting the city's vibrant energy. When I walked into the auditorium, I felt no fear or doubt. Only a quiet confidence. I wore a soft gray suit designed by Elise, my dearest friend from last year's summit, its tailored lines a symbol of my transformation. Pinned to my jacket was a small wooden table brooch, the symbol of the new project Margaret and I had launched, Build Your Own Table, helping women build careers and confidence from the ground up, its mission now reaching thousands through workshops and grants. I sat among 6 women, each one a living story, their faces etched with resilience. One had been shut out by her family, her voice steady as she spoke of starting her own business. Another had overcome abuse, unemployment, and loss, her eyes fierce with pride as she described her new role as a community organizer. But all of them had one thing in common. They heard my story 2 years ago and asked themselves, if she did it, why not me? The first to speak was Linda, a retired teacher with silver-streaked hair. After watching Sarah's video, she said, her voice warm with gratitude, I applied to volunteer at a skills center for single mothers. I used to think I had nothing left to offer, but then I realized worth isn't in titles. It's in making someone feel seen. Next was Tanya, a mother of 3 who had once been homeless, her hands calloused but strong. Now I run a small bakery near my kids' school. I watched the part where Sarah said, we don't need to ask for seats, build your own table. And I started saving pennies, digging up my grandma's old recipes to carve out my own place. I listened to each voice, my heart filled with something raw and real, faith, effort, and dignity rediscovered. When it was my turn, I didn't use my prepared notes, trusting the truth to guide me. I stood, took a deep breath, and looked into the faces waiting for me, their eyes a mirror of my own journey. I used to be the one behind a closed door, thinking I had to be softer, smarter, less troublesome to earn a place at someone else's table. But the truth is, sometimes people don't reject you because you're lacking. They reject you because they don't know how to value you, and that says nothing about your worth. It only means it's time to build your own table. I saw Margaret's eyes glisten from the audience, her pride a quiet beacon. Ethan sat in the third row, taller than I remembered, his sketchbook open as he drew the scene. Sophie waved with tight lips, trying not to cry, her small hand clutching a tissue. I once sat in a laundry room and thought I was an extra piece, I continued, my voice steady. But that laundry room wasn't the end. It was the start. That was the place where I stopped asking to be seen and started choosing to believe I already mattered. The room was silent, not out of disinterest, but because they were with me fully, their breaths held in shared understanding. These women weren't just an audience. They were proof of what I'd learned. When you stop waiting for an invitation, the world begins to open in ways you never imagined. The event ended with hugs, exchanged cards, and promises to keep building more tables together, their voices a chorus of hope. That evening, as I packed for the flight home, a final message from Abigail arrived, her tone softer but still edged with resentment. I read your book, Sarah. It's impressive. Maybe we misjudged you. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, her words a belated olive branch but one that felt hollow after years of dismissal. I replied, brief and firm. I'm glad you read it, Abigail. But I've built my own table now. If you want to talk, it's on my terms. I hit send. A quiet act of closure, knowing I no longer needed her approval. That night, back in my hotel room, the Boston skyline glittering through the window, I opened my laptop and typed the first line of my second book. Not everyone needs a seat. Some of us are meant to have a stage. I looked up and saw myself in the mirror, not the woman pushed into the laundry room, but the woman at the center, with a voice, a heart, and a life that no longer needs permission to begin. Her reflection radiant with hard-won strength. Sarah's journey is living proof that sometimes being pushed to the margins is exactly how we find our true worth. From a single mom cast aside by her own family, she rose to tell her story in her own voice and inspired thousands. Sarah no longer lives to be accepted, she lives to be herself. And in doing so, she found success, healing, and a chosen family built on genuine love. What do you think of Sarah's journey? Have you ever experienced a moment like hers? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sarah's journey from a laundry room to a stage unveils the pain of being overlooked, yet it radiates the courage to reclaim one's worth. Many know the sting of being sidelined, yet rise to build their own table. Your struggles, like hers, are valid and powerful. If you fought to be seen or found your voice, you're not alone. Share your story below or with a trusted friend. Your truth can inspire others to stand tall, fostering a community where empathy transforms pain into purpose. What's your journey? Speak it. We're listening.